The first time my son tried to take my life away, he wore the navy suit I bought him for his father's funeral. He stood 6 feet from me in a county courtroom, one hand resting on a leather folder, and told a judge I could no longer understand my own decisions. He said I forgot appointments. He said I had given money to strangers. He said I had become suspicious, secretive, and reckless with assets I was no longer capable of managing. Then his attorney asked the court to appoint an emergency guardian over my life and my estate. My son looked at me only once. His face held the careful grief of a man doing something painful for all the right reasons. What he did not know was that, before that day was over, he would present a rescue plan to the board of the company where he worked. He also did not know that I controlled 52% of that company's voting shares. I had kept that fact from him for 11 years. By the end of the week, one of us would lose control of something we believed belonged to us. At that moment, I honestly did not know which one. My name is Eleanor Bennett. I was 67 years old, widowed, and living in a white clapboard house outside Columbus, Ohio, when a deputy knocked on my door on a wet Tuesday morning in October. I remember the rain because I had left a basket of late tomatoes on the porch. I remember the deputy wiping his boots twice before stepping inside. And I remember the exact weight of the envelope he handed me, although that makes no sense. Paper does not become heavier because your only child has signed it. The heading read, "In the matter of Eleanor May Bennett, an alleged incompetent adult." For several seconds, I thought there must be another Eleanor Bennett. Then I saw Daniel's affidavit. My son claimed I had become confused after my husband's death. He described 3 incidents. In May, I had missed a cardiology appointment. In July, I had sent $25,000 to a woman he called an online acquaintance. In September, I had accused someone of entering my house and moving documents. Each event had happened. None meant what Daniel said it meant. The cardiology appointment had been moved by the office, but I had written the original date on my kitchen calendar. The woman was Marisol Vega, whose husband had worked with mine for 23 years. The money was a documented loan to keep her from losing a small machine shop. As for the papers, someone had entered my study. The brass key was not where I kept it, and a file containing old shareholder correspondence had been put back upside down. That was the first moment I understood the danger. Daniel was not inventing a story from nothing. He was arranging true things in the most damaging order. "Are you all right, ma'am?" the deputy asked. "No," I said. "But I understand what you handed me." His eyes softened. That frightened me more than the papers. The petition requested an emergency order freezing large transfers and appointing Daniel temporary guardian of my person and estate. The court had set a preliminary hearing for Friday, 3 days away. I called Daniel. He answered on the second ring. "Mom." Not "hello." Not "how are you." Just "Mom," spoken like a man entering a room where glass had broken. A deputy was here. Silence stretched between us. "I wanted to tell you myself." "Before or after you had me declared incompetent?" "That's not what this is." "It is printed at the top of the page." He exhaled. "It's a protective proceeding. I asked you to let me help. You asked me to sign a durable power of attorney naming you. Because you're moving money around and refusing to explain it." "My money." "Dad's money too." There it was, not greed exactly, but inheritance spoken in the present tense. Daniel's voice lowered. "You gave $25,000 to someone I have never met. You changed the locks. You canceled Thanksgiving. You won't tell me what you're doing with Dad's files. Every time I ask a simple question, you act like I'm trying to rob you." I looked toward the study. The door was closed. "Did you use your old key to enter my house in September?" I asked. He waited half a beat too long. This is what I mean, he said. You hear yourself, don't you? I do. Please don't fight me on Friday. Let the evaluator talk to you. If everything is fine, then everything is fine. It was a neat sentence. It made resistance sound like proof. After we hung up, I sat at the kitchen table until the rain stopped. I wanted to call my late husband, Frank. Grief does that, it lets the body reach for a person the mind knows is gone. Instead, I called Naomi Price. Naomi had been my attorney for 8 years, but she was not a courtroom magician. She handled estate plans, trusts, contracts, and the slow, unglamorous work of making intentions legible. She was 54, wore bright red reading glasses, and had a habit of going quiet when other lawyers started performing. She read the petition while I sat across from her that afternoon. This isn't flimsy, she said at last. I appreciated her too much to like her in that moment. He has 3 affidavits. His own, his wife's, and Dr. Sanderson's. My doctor signed something? Your former primary care doctor. He says Daniel reported memory lapses and that you failed to complete a cognitive screening he recommended. He recommended it in a voicemail after I had already transferred to a different practice. Do you have that voicemail? No. Naomi tapped the page. Daniel's attorney is asking for a limited emergency order. That makes them look measured. They aren't asking to put you in a facility. They want control over transfers above $5,000, access to financial records, and authority to preserve assets pending a full evaluation. Preserve them for whom? That is the right question outside court. Inside court, the question is whether you can manage them safely. I told her about the misplaced file. Do you have cameras? No alarm log? The alarm was off. I stopped setting it during the day. Anyone else with a key? Daniel. Or he used to. She removed her glasses. Eleanor, I need the complete version of this, including anything embarrassing. Courts do not punish people for being eccentric. They do become concerned when eccentricity coincides with secrecy, large transfers, and family reports of decline. So I told her one secret. Not the largest one. I told her I had been reviewing old corporate files because Frank had left me interests in several private investments. I said I believed one had become much more valuable. I did not say which one or how much. Naomi watched me for a long moment. If you make me discover the important fact from opposing counsel, she said, you will have 2 problems instead of 1. I know. Do you? I looked down at my hands. They were steady, but only because I had pressed them flat against my knees. Give me until tomorrow morning. She did not agree. She simply began listing what she needed: medical records, bank statements, the loan documents for Marisol, my calendar, names of people who saw me regularly, and consent for an independent geriatric evaluation. As I left, she said, one more thing. Do not call your son again. Do not move money. Do not shred anything. And do not try to outsmart the appearance of incapacity by behaving unpredictably. That last instruction followed me home. When I returned home, the old shareholder file was open on my desk. This time, I knew I had closed it. I did not sleep. At 4 in the morning, I made coffee and opened the fireproof cabinet in my basement. Inside were birth certificates, insurance policies, Frank's military records, and a gray binder labeled North Star. Beneath it lay a sealed envelope in Frank's square handwriting, for Daniel, when he's ready to stop arguing with me. I had been deciding for 2 years that Daniel was not ready. That morning I pushed the letter aside and opened the binder. The label was deliberately dull. Frank believed truly valuable things should look like appliance warranties. Northstar was a family trust created after we sold Bennett Precision, the tool and die shop Frank had started with 2 borrowed lathes. Its most important asset was a stake in Halcyon Mobility Systems, the company where Daniel was now senior vice president for strategic growth. Frank had supplied Halcyon when it was a 12-person operation. During a cash crisis in 1998, he accepted shares in place of money the company could not pay. He quietly bought more when early investors wanted out. Years later, we placed those shares in Northstar for privacy and estate planning. When Frank died, I became the trustee. The documents in that gray binder gave Northstar 52% of Halcyon's votes. Other investors still owned most of the financial value, but when shareholders had to decide who controlled the company, my signature carried the majority. The arrangement was legal and known to Halcyon's lawyers, auditors, transfer agent, and board chair. It was not disclosed to Daniel. That omission had begun as prudence and hardened into cowardice. Daniel joined Halcyon 7 years earlier after leaving a larger automotive supplier. Frank worried our son would never know whether promotions were earned. Daniel, already sensitive to living in his father's shadow, had insisted he wanted no family help. So Frank said nothing. After Frank died, I continued saying nothing. At first, I told myself I was honoring both men. Later, I told myself there was never a good time. The truth was less flattering. I enjoyed knowing something Daniel did not. When he became impatient with my questions about debt covenants or supplier concentration, I could quietly assure myself that I understood more than he imagined. Secrets create their own little throne. I had been sitting on mine. At 6, I called Samuel Ortiz, Halcyon's board chair. "Eleanor?" His voice sharpened immediately. "We never spoke that early. Has Daniel requested access to the beneficial ownership schedule?" "Not from me." "Has anyone?" "Yesterday, outside counsel asked whether we had current capacity documentation for the Northstar trustee. The cold that moved through me had nothing to do with October." "Who initiated the question?" "They didn't say. I assumed it was routine because of Friday's financing presentation." "What financing presentation?" Samuel went quiet. "He told me Daniel had developed a plan to address a liquidity problem at Halcyon. A major customer had delayed payments. Raw material costs had risen. Worse, a new production line in Tennessee was months behind schedule. Daniel proposed bridge financing from Broadgate Capital, followed by the sale of Halcyon's adaptive seating division. That division produced modest margins. It also held patents that supported much of the company's long-term value. Why wasn't I sent the board package?" I asked. "It went to the Northstar portal Sunday. I had not checked it. That was mistake number 1. I could not blame on anyone else." Samuel continued. "Daniel says timing is critical. Broadgate's offer expires Friday afternoon." "Who is their contact?" "A man named Russell Dane." I knew the name. Not well, but enough. Dane had spent a decade buying distressed industrial businesses, separating their assets, and selling what remained. He called it unlocking value. Frank called it stripping copper from a church roof. "Do not tell Daniel we spoke," I said. "Eleanor, what is happening?" "My son filed a guardianship petition yesterday." Samuel swore softly. "I need every communication involving Northstar's authority or my capacity. Preserve metadata. No conclusions, no accusations. Just preserve it." "Do we postpone the board meeting?" I almost said yes. Then I saw what Daniel's attorney would do with it. Unstable owner disrupts urgent corporate financing out of personal anger. "No. Continue under the bylaws." I will attend through North Star's designated observer. Your designation expired last quarter. Another failure. Another small neglected task that now looked like incapacity. Then I will not attend, I said. Send the materials to Naomi Price under the confidentiality agreement. After the call, I logged into the portal. My password failed twice before I realized I was using the old one. On the third attempt, the account locked. I stared at the screen and heard Daniel's petition in my head, confused, forgetful, unable to manage complex assets. There is a special terror in being 67 and making an ordinary mistake while someone is collecting ordinary mistakes as evidence. At 8, my daughter-in-law, Claire, arrived without warning. Claire was 41 and worked as an occupational therapist. She had an open face that made strangers tell her medical histories in grocery lines. That morning, she looked as though she had rehearsed being calm. I brought muffins, she said. Did Daniel send you? Her pause answered. I let her in anyway. She surveyed the kitchen. Her eyes rested on the coffee pot, the unopened mail, and the tomatoes still outside. Noticed, recorded, interpreted. I'm not evaluating you, she said. Then stop looking at my kitchen like it's a patient. She flinched. I regretted it immediately, which made me angrier. Claire placed a blueberry muffin on a plate. Daniel is scared. Of what? Of losing you the way he lost Frank. Your husband did not file paperwork to take away his father's rights. Frank let Daniel help. That was not true. During his final illness, Frank had allowed Daniel to manage medical appointments. Financially, he trusted almost no one. But Daniel had needed to believe he was useful, and Frank had needed to let him. Claire wrapped both hands around her mug. He thinks you're being manipulated. By Marisol? By someone. He saw emails about North Star. I kept my face still. How? A printout was on your desk when we came by after Labor Day. I wasn't home after Labor Day. She blinked. Daniel had told me they left soup on the porch that day. We used his key, she said. He was worried because you didn't answer. My phone was in the car. I was at Marisol's shop. I know that now. What did he take? Nothing. What did he photograph? Claire stood. This is exactly why he is worried. Everything becomes an interrogation. Because you entered my locked home and read private papers. Her face changed. For the first time, the helpful professional disappeared and my son's tired wife stood there. Do you know what he has been carrying? She asked. The plant expansion was his recommendation. It is failing. 200 jobs could go. He barely sleeps. He thinks if the company collapses, it will prove every ugly thing his father ever implied about him. Frank did not think Daniel was a failure. Did Daniel know that? The question landed cleanly. Before leaving, Claire said, please take the evaluation. If you're fine, fight about the rest later. Did you sign an affidavit? Her hand tightened around the strap of her purse. I described what I saw. You described my kitchen? I described you asking the same question 3 times at dinner. I remembered the dinner. Frank's birthday, the first after his death. Daniel had announced the Tennessee expansion approval 3 separate times because each telling became a toast. I had asked the same question, whether the projected customer contracts were binding, 3 times because he never answered it. Claire, I said, were those contracts binding? She looked away. That was the first crack in Daniel's rescue story. The evaluator arrived Thursday morning. Because Daniel had asked for emergency powers, both sides had agreed to an expedited assessment by Dr. Lena Shaw from the court's approved list. She was direct without being cold. She tested my memory, attention, language, spatial reasoning, and ability to explain financial decisions. I named the date, the president, and the counties bordering mine. I drew a clock. I repeated 5 words after a delay. I subtracted sevens from 100 and made an error at 58. Start from there, she said. I corrected myself. Then she asked why I had loaned Marisol $25,000. I explained the promissory note, collateral, interest rate, repayment schedule, and my reason for accepting a below-market return. Marisol's shop employed 9 people, 3 of them over 55, and had purchase orders sufficient to repay once a broken CNC machine was replaced. Was sentiment involved? Dr. Shaw asked. Of course. Sentiment is involved in most decisions. Competence is not the absence of sentiment. She made a note. Her phone vibrated on the table. She ignored it. Mine vibrated a moment later. It was Naomi. Daniel's lawyer just filed a supplemental exhibit. A photograph from your study. 1 North Star page, cropped. I read the message twice. Daniel had not merely looked at my papers. He had carried one into court in his pocket. Dr. Shaw watched my face. Has something happened? I handed her the phone. Does that make you angry? She asked. Yes. Does it change your willingness to finish this assessment? For a moment, I wanted it to. That was the danger of the petition. Every natural reaction arrived wearing a label someone else could choose. No, I said. But it changes what I believe my son is willing to do. Why not tell your son? Because he would disapprove. Is avoiding disapproval worth creating suspicion? I hesitated. It did not seem costly at the time. And now? Now I am paying interest. She almost smiled. The hardest question was not mathematical. Mrs. Bennett, is there any major asset you have concealed from your son or from your counsel? I had disclosed North Star to Naomi that morning. Watching her absorb the ownership documents had been like watching a fuse burn toward a sealed box. From my counsel, no, I said. From my son, yes. Why? Pride. His and mine. That answer cost me something. It also saved me from trying to sound flawless, which would have been its own kind of evidence. After the evaluation, Naomi and I met with a litigation attorney named David Chin. Guardianship was his field. He did not stride in with a solution. He spent 40 minutes asking whether I understood that even capable people could lose an emergency hearing when the judge had incomplete information and family members appeared credible. The court's job is protection, he said. We should not treat your son as if filing the petition itself proves bad faith. Adult children file these petitions for good reasons, bad reasons, and mixed reasons. Judges see all 3. What do we ask for tomorrow? Dismissal if Dr. Shaw's preliminary findings support it. If the court wants more time, we offer narrower safeguards, dual signatures for extraordinary transfers, independent accounting, no restriction on your personal decisions. Voluntary, temporary, and without a finding of incapacity. That feels like surrender. It feels like due process. I disliked him too, which was becoming a sign that I had hired the right people. Naomi laid out the corporate complication. If Daniel became guardian of my estate, he might claim authority to direct North Star or vote its halcyon shares. But the trust instrument named 2 independent successor trustees if I was adjudicated incapacitated. Daniel was not one of them. So he couldn't control the company, I said. Not automatically, Naomi replied. But if he obtains your financial records, he learns the ownership structure. He could challenge the trust, pressure the successors, or use the information in negotiations. More immediately, the allegation itself may let Broadgate claim uncertainty over shareholder approval. David looked at me. Does Daniel know you control Halcyon? I don't believe so. Then we should not assume his petition is a scheme to seize it. Someone asked corporate counsel for my capacity documents. Someone may have discovered Northstar without identifying you. We follow evidence. Evidence arrived at 4:30. Samuel sent Naomi a preserved email chain. Russell Dane of Broadgate had written to Daniel 2 weeks earlier, "Before we commit, we need clarity on the controlling block. Our diligence suggests the trustee may be vulnerable to a capacity challenge. If authority shifts, timing could improve materially." Daniel's reply was 6 words. "I am addressing the family situation." I read it twice. Naomi said, "It is suggestive, not conclusive." He knew. He knew there was a trustee with a possible capacity issue. We cannot prove he knew you were the trustee from this. I wanted certainty because certainty permits clean anger. Instead, we had a sentence shaped like a trapdoor. At 6, Daniel texted me. "I never wanted this to become public. Agree to temporary safeguards and I will ask my lawyer to seal as much as possible." I typed 3 different replies and deleted them all. Then another message appeared. "Dad would have wanted me to protect what he built." I finally answered. "Your father built more than you know." The dots appeared, vanished, and appeared again. He did not respond. Friday's preliminary hearing took place in a courtroom smaller than my high school library. There was no jury, no dramatic gallery, only fluorescent lights and rows of polished benches worn pale at the edges. Daniel sat beside his attorney, Pamela Voss. Claire sat behind him. She looked ill. Judge Miriam Holt entered at 9. She reviewed the request as a protective matter and reminded everyone that the proceeding was not a contest over inheritance. Pamela presented Daniel as a reluctant son responding to a pattern. She did not exaggerate. That made her more effective. Daniel testified that I had become isolated after Frank's death. True. He said I canceled regular family dinners. True. I could not bear his father's empty chair. He described finding stacks of unopened mail. True, most were catalogs and charitable solicitations. He described my $25,000 transfer, the missed appointment, the changed locks, and my belief that someone had searched my study. "What do you seek?" Pamela asked him. "Time," Daniel said. "Time to make sure she is safe. I don't want her house. I don't want her money. I want a neutral professional to review things before she makes a decision that can't be undone." He sounded sincere because part of him was. That was what hurt. On cross-examination, David asked whether Daniel had entered my home without permission. "I used a key my mother gave me years ago." "Was she home?" "No." "Was there an emergency?" "She had not answered calls." "For how long?" "Most of the afternoon." "Did you photograph documents in her study?" Pamela objected. The judge allowed the question. Daniel's eyes moved toward me. "I photographed one page because it contained unfamiliar financial names and I was concerned." "Did you provide that photograph to Russell Dane?" Pamela stood so quickly her chair rolled backward. After argument, the judge allowed a limited answer because it bore on the petitioner's motive. Daniel swallowed. I asked Mr. Dane if he recognized the names. The room seemed to tilt without moving. "You sent private financial information taken from your mother's home to a lender negotiating with your employer?" "I sent a cropped image. There were no account numbers." "Did Mr. Dane tell you Northstar might control Halcyon?" "He said it could be connected to a legacy shareholder." "Did you know your mother was Northstar's trustee when you filed this petition?" Daniel looked at Pamela. She could not answer for him. I suspected it Thursday, he said. Yesterday. Not when he filed. That distinction mattered legally. Emotionally, it did little. David did not ask about the 6-word email. He saved it. Dr. Shaw testified next. Her preliminary assessment found no evidence of major neurocognitive disorder and no present basis to conclude I could not understand or manage my affairs. She noted mild anxiety, ordinary age-associated retrieval delays, and unresolved grief. She recommended a full report but opposed broad guardianship on the evidence available. Pamela asked whether an intelligent person could conceal cognitive decline during a short evaluation. Yes, Dr. Shaw said. Could paranoia appear intermittently? Yes. Could financially sophisticated adults still be exploited? Yes. Each answer fell like a stone on Daniel's side of the scale. Then Pamela asked whether secrecy and unexplained transfers were warning signs. They can be, Dr. Shaw replied. They can also be manifestations of privacy. Context is essential. When I testified, David kept it simple. I explained the loan, produced the note and collateral documents, described my finances, and acknowledged missing the appointment. I did not pretend I had managed every detail perfectly. Why change the locks? He asked. Because someone entered my house and examined papers without permission. Do you now know who? I looked at Daniel. Yes. Pamela's cross-examination began gently. Mrs. Bennet, your son loves you, doesn't he? Yes. And you love him? Yes. Yet you concealed a major asset from him. Children are not automatically entitled to their parents' balance sheets. Even when that asset affects the company responsible for his livelihood? There it was. Daniel's head turned toward his lawyer. Pamela had gone farther than he expected. David objected, but the ownership question had entered the room. Judge Holt asked counsel to approach. They spoke quietly. Then the judge cleared the courtroom except for parties and counsel because confidential business information might be involved. My heart beat so hard I could feel it in my throat. Under seal, I identified North Star and explained my role. Daniel did not move until I said the number. 52% of the voting shares. He turned fully toward me. The expression on his face was not triumph or calculation. It was shock, then recognition, then something that looked painfully like humiliation. Since when? He whispered. Judge Holt warned him not to interrupt. I answered anyway. Since before you joined the company. Control passed to me when your father died. Daniel stared at the table. Pamela recovered first. She argued that concealment of an asset of that magnitude supported temporary oversight. David argued that sophisticated estate planning and privacy were not incapacity, and that Daniel's unauthorized disclosure to a counterparty created the greater immediate risk. The judge recessed for 20 minutes. In the hallway, Daniel came toward me. David stepped between us, but I said it was all right. You let me work there for 7 years, Daniel said. His voice shook. You sat through every promotion, every bad quarter, every time I told you what the board thought of me, and you knew you owned the votes. I did not choose your promotions. How would I know that? Because your father and I stayed out of operations. That's not an answer. He was right. Did Dad put me there? No, did he tell them to hire me? Not to my knowledge. Not to your knowledge. He laughed once without humor. You made my whole career impossible to trust. You made my competence a public question. Because you were hiding this. You filed before you knew what this was. He stopped. For 1 second, we were not petitioner and respondent. We were a frightened son and an angry mother, each holding a fact the other could not explain away. The bailiff called us back. Judge Holt denied the emergency guardianship and declined to freeze my assets. She ordered completion of Dr. Shaw's report, directed both sides to preserve evidence, and scheduled a status conference in 30 days. She also prohibited either party from using confidential information obtained through the proceeding for a commercial advantage. It was a legal win, but not a clean one. The case remained open. The allegation remained in a court file. And the board meeting was already underway. As we left, Samuel called. Broadgate amended its offer, he said. They want warrants that could give them 30% voting control if we breach the repayment covenant. And the board? 3 directors are prepared to accept. They say we have no alternative. How long? They reconvene at 2. It was 11:47. Then he added, Daniel told them North Star may be unable to vote. The court had just refused to take away my authority. My son was trying to spend it anyway. Naomi, David, and I drove to Halcyon's headquarters in separate cars. I spent the 40-minute trip reading the board package on a tablet Samuel had sent by courier. The problem was worse than I knew and different from what Daniel had described. The Tennessee line was not simply late. Halcyon had counted on non-binding forecasts from Atlas Automotive Access, a national vehicle modifier, to justify equipment leases and hiring. Daniel had championed the expansion, but the board had approved it unanimously after a consulting firm validated demand. The consulting firm had been recommended by Broadgate. Its name was Mercer Vale, though I began thinking of it simply as Russell's consultant. Buried in an appendix was a conflict disclosure. Russell's brother-in-law owned 20% of it. It was disclosed in 6-point type, which meant it was legally visible and practically hidden. There was more. Broadgate's bridge loan carried a high interest rate, strict weekly liquidity covenants, and warrants triggered by breaches. The proposed sale of adaptive seating was not to an unrelated buyer. The buyer was a fund in which Broadgate served as advisor. The plan was not necessarily illegal. Distressed financing is often expensive because distress is real. But Broadgate stood to profit as lender, warrant holder, and advisor to the asset buyer. Halcyon would survive in name while surrendering the patents and division most likely to restore it. Daniel had highlighted the conflicts in his presentation. He had also written that no better alternative existed. I called Marisol, the machine shop owner I had loaned the $25,000. I need the truth about the Atlas orders, I said. Her shop supplied brackets to Halcyon and 2 Atlas subcontractors. She understood the ground-level market better than most consultants. Atlas is delaying conversions, not canceling them, she said. Their new federal fleet contract got protested. Everyone is waiting. How long? 90 days, maybe 6 months. But there is another buyer. Veterans Transit Cooperative is looking for domestic adaptive components. They called me because Halcyon's purchasing department would not return them. Who did they call? A vice president named Lucas Bell. Lucas ran the adaptive seating division, the very unit Daniel proposed selling. Why wouldn't he return them? He did. Then someone told him to stop negotiations during strategic review. I asked her to send every lawful communication she had. No confidential customer drawings, no rumors, only emails she was entitled to share. At Halcyon, the receptionist did not recognize me. That was appropriate. Samuel met us downstairs and escorted us to a conference room away from the board. Naomi read the trust and bylaws while David called the court clerk to ensure our actions would not violate the judge's order. The order prohibited commercial use of information obtained through the proceeding. My authority came from documents and rights I possessed before the case. Still, we created a record separating the two. You can vote the shares, Naomi said. But there is no shareholder vote currently scheduled. The board has authority to approve the loan up to this amount. Can I remove directors? By written consent, subject to notice and the cumulative voting provisions. But firing a board in the middle of a liquidity crisis because your son opposed you will look exactly like the behavior his petition alleges. Then what can I do? Samuel answered. Speak as the controlling shareholder. You cannot command our vote on a transaction delegated to us, but you can tell us what consequences you expect. That sounded like command with nicer stationery. No, I said. If the deal is necessary, threatening directors does not make it unnecessary. We need an alternative. We had less than an hour. I called 2 regional banks. One would not consider a private industrial credit on short notice. The other already had too much exposure to Halcyon's sector. Northstar could lend directly, but most of my liquid assets were not personal cash, they were trust investments with duties and restrictions. A rushed insider loan would require valuation, terms, independent approval, and conflict safeguards. It could not responsibly be invented before 2 o'clock. This is where revenge stories lie. They give the hidden owner a checkbook without limits and a room full of people waiting to applaud. Real control is slower. It comes tied to duties, documents, other people's livelihoods, and the possibility that using it badly proves your opponent right. At 1:20, Daniel entered the conference room. The board wants you to appear, he said. He had removed his suit jacket. Sweat darkened the edges of his collar. Do they know who I am? I asked. They do now. Samuel started to explain, but Daniel held up a hand. Broadgate found Northstar through an old UCC filing. Russell showed me after I sent the photograph. I did not know it was Mom until yesterday morning, when I recognized Dad's old trust attorney on a document. And you did not withdraw the petition, I said. By then I thought the secrecy proved my point. Did you tell Russell you were filing? David asked. I told him there was a family capacity issue. I did not send court papers. Why tell him anything? Daniel looked through the glass wall toward the boardroom. Because he said Broadgate might walk if the controlling shareholder could block the deal. I needed him to stay. You used my supposed decline to reassure a lender, I said. I was trying to keep 800 people employed. By selling the division with the strongest patents to that lender's affiliate. To keep the rest alive. Did you know about Veterans Transit Cooperative? He frowned. Who? I showed him Marisol's email. Daniel read it, then read it again. Lucas never brought this to me. Someone told him to stop negotiating. Strategic review came from the transaction committee. Who chairs it? His face tightened. Martin Kessler, the director who chairs the transaction committee. Martin was Halcyon's longest-serving independent director and the loudest advocate for Broadgate. Samuel said, Martin also introduced Russell Dane. The shape of the problem shifted. Daniel sat down. You think Martin suppressed a customer lead to force the sale? I think we have a question worth delaying a vote, I said. Broadgate's offer expires at 4. Conveniently. He looked at me with something close to his childhood expression when a machine he had assembled refused to run. If we delay and payroll fails, will Northstar fund it? There was the hard edge beneath everything. My son believed I could prevent disaster and was choosing secrecy over rescue. I don't know yet, I said. You own the company and you don't know? Owning votes is not the same as having unrestricted cash. He stood abruptly. Then come tell the board your alternative is an email from a machine shop and a maybe. He left the door open behind him. Naomi glanced at me. He has a point. I know. At 1:48, I entered the boardroom for the first time in my life. 7 directors sat around a walnut table. Daniel and the chief financial officer occupied seats along the wall. Russell Dane appeared on a large screen from New York, silver-haired and patient. Samuel introduced me as trustee of Northstar Fiduciary Trust and controlling shareholder. No one applauded. I was grateful. Martin Kessler leaned back in his chair. Mrs. Bennet, we were given to understand there was uncertainty about your authority. A court denied emergency restrictions this morning. Russell's expression did not change. The underlying proceeding remains active, correct? David answered. Any suggestion that Mrs. Bennet lacks present authority would be inaccurate. I am not making a legal conclusion, Russell said. Broadgate prices uncertainty. Of course it did. Then it helped create some. Samuel asked Daniel to summarize the liquidity forecast. Daniel spoke for 12 minutes without notes. He did not hide the Tennessee failure or his role in it. Payroll could be met for 5 weeks, perhaps 7 if 2 customers paid on schedule. A lease covenant breach would occur sooner. Without bridge financing or a rapid receivables facility, the company risked default. He was not a fool. He was not a thief. He was a capable executive cornered by his own mistake and desperate for a door. Then Martin moved to approve the Broadgate package. Before a second, I said, I ask the board to consider a customer lead that may affect the valuation of adaptive seating. I distributed the email. Martin barely glanced at it. This is hearsay from a supplier, he said. Then call Lucas Bell. We have conducted months of review. A 5-minute call should not frighten months of review. Samuel asked the corporate secretary to bring Lucas in. Lucas arrived 10 minutes later looking as if he expected to be fired. He confirmed Veterans Transit had requested preliminary pricing for a 3-year program. Estimated revenue would not solve the immediate cash crisis, but the prospect could materially affect the division's sale value and support alternative financing. Why was this not in the board package? Samuel asked. Lucas looked at Martin, then Daniel. Mr. Kessler told me all new commercial discussions required transaction committee approval. I sent the lead to the committee portal. The corporate secretary checked. The upload was there, time-stamped 12 days earlier. Martin's jaw reddened. It was preliminary and non-binding. Management receives dozens of inquiries. You did not disclose it, Samuel said. Because it did not change the need for immediate financing. Russell spoke from the screen. Broadgate's offer already assumes generous value for the division. Speculative leads should not derail a transaction that protects the enterprise. That sentence revealed more than he intended. He was defending not just his loan but the affiliate's purchase price. I asked the CFO how much cash Halcyon needed to avoid default for 90 days. 12 million, conservatively. Northstar could not responsibly produce 12 million in cash that afternoon. But it owned something a bank could value, Halcyon shares without liens. Naomi saw the thought before I finished having it. A shareholder-backed facility would still take diligence, she whispered. How much time? Days, not hours, if a lender already knows the assets. I knew one that did. Frank had kept a relationship with Heartland Commercial Bank for 34 years. Its chief credit officer, Evelyn Brooks, served with me on a hospital foundation finance committee. I had avoided calling her because I did not want to trade on friendship. Pride again, dressed as ethics. I asked the board for a 30-minute recess. Martin objected. Samuel granted it. Evelyn answered from an airport lounge in Dallas. I disclosed the conflict, the timeline, the guardianship proceeding, and the Broadgate terms. She listened without interrupting. "I cannot promise approval," she said. "I can tell you whether there is a path." The path was a short-term facility to Halcyon secured by receivables and equipment, with Northstar pledging a limited portion of its non-Halcyon securities as additional collateral, not the controlling shares. Independent committees for both borrower and trust would need counsel. Pricing would be high but lower than Broadgate's. There would be no warrants and no forced division sale. Heartland needed 5 business days for diligence. To survive those 5 days, Halcyon required $2 million. That amount Northstar could provide through an interim note, if independent trustees approved and if the board confirmed solvency. I returned to the boardroom with an alternative, not a miracle. The board debated for nearly an hour. Martin called Heartland's path uncertain. He was right. Daniel called the interim note an insider transaction. He was right too. We proposed independent review, market interest, a short maturity, and recusal of any conflicted director. Broadgate extended its deadline by 45 minutes, then threatened to withdraw. At 3:52, the board voted 4-3 to reject Broadgate and pursue Heartland. Martin and 2 directors voted no. I did not vote. My power was present, but the board made the decision. For the first time that day, I breathed fully. Then the corporate secretary's phone rang. She listened, wrote something down, and slid the paper to Samuel. Samuel read it and looked at Daniel. "The Tennessee equipment lessor has declared an event of default," he said. They received a copy of the guardianship petition and a statement that Halcyon's controlling shareholder is incapacitated. The room went silent. Daniel stood. "I did not send it." Pamela Voss had only filed the petition with the court. David had it. Naomi had it. Claire had seen it. Daniel had it. And Russell Dane knew it existed. Samuel turned toward the blank screen. Broadgate had disconnected. That was the midpoint I had not anticipated. The guardianship case was no longer merely a weapon Daniel might have used. Someone else was using it against both of us. The next 48 hours were not cinematic. They were conference calls, document holds, insurance notices, and people eating crackers over keyboards. Halcyon's counsel persuaded the lessor to suspend enforcement until Monday after providing the court order and current authority documents. Heartland began diligence. Northstar's independent co-trustee, a retired bank executive named Helen Park, approved negotiation of the interim loan but refused final authorization until she saw a solvency certificate. "If the company cannot repay," Helen told me, "your desire to save it does not make the trust whole." 800 jobs are not the only beneficiaries named in this instrument. She was right, and I resented her for protecting me from myself. Daniel remained at headquarters. The guardianship petition remained pending. We spoke only in meetings. On Saturday morning, Claire came to my house alone. This time, she brought no muffins. She placed Daniel's tablet on my kitchen table. "He left this at home. There is something you need to see." "Did you open his messages?" "Yes." The symmetry was not lost on either of us. She showed me a thread between Daniel and Russell. Over 6 weeks, Russell had cultivated him with the practiced intimacy of a man who learned weaknesses for a living. He praised Daniel for facing realities the older board avoided. He blamed Frank's generation for leaving a rigid company. He suggested Daniel could lead Halcyon after restructuring. Then, 3 weeks earlier, Daniel wrote, "My mother is making strange transfers and hiding Dad's financial records. If Northstar connects to her, we may have a capacity problem." Russell replied, "You have obligations as an officer and as a son. Handle the family side properly. We can handle the capital side." There was no explicit conspiracy. No instruction to file. Just encouragement placed exactly where fear already lived. Further down was a draft employment agreement. If Broadgate's transaction closed, Daniel would become president with a substantial retention bonus. Did you know about this? I asked. Claire nodded, tears in her eyes. He said it protected us if the company failed. Why bring it to me? Because yesterday he told the board he had no personal interest in the deal. That could cost Daniel his job. It could also save the company from a tainted process. Does he know you took the tablet? No, I pushed it back toward her. Then take it home. You need the evidence. We need evidence obtained properly. Tell him what you found. Ask him to preserve it. If he deletes it, the company's forensic team may recover it from backups. She stared at me. After what he did to you, you're protecting him? I am protecting the truth from becoming another stolen photograph. She covered her face. When she lowered her hands, she said, he thinks Frank never respected him. Frank respected him. Frank was also hard on him. He said Frank called the Tennessee plan a monument to vanity. I remembered the argument. Daniel had presented the expansion during one of Frank's last good months. After Daniel left, Frank called the glossy architectural rendering a monument to vanity. He also spent 2 nights reviewing the demand model and told me Daniel had identified a real market, even if the scale scared him. Frank never told Daniel the second part. I never did either. The dead leave unfinished sentences. The living decide whether to complete them. Your father-in-law was afraid praise would make Daniel careless, I said. I was afraid contradicting Frank would make things worse. We both mistook withholding for discipline. Claire looked toward the closed study. And the company ownership? That was worse. I told myself the secret protected Daniel's independence. Eventually it protected my pride. At noon, Daniel arrived. Claire had called him from the driveway. He looked from her to the tablet and understood. You went through my messages? He asked. Yes, she said. And you're going to disclose the agreement? He sat heavily. For several minutes, none of us spoke. Then Daniel said, I did not sign it. Did you negotiate it? I asked. Russell sent a draft. I told him we could discuss it after the financing. You should have disclosed it. I know. Why didn't you? He laughed bitterly. You want the layered answer or the ugly one? Both. The layered answer is that I believed the company needed continuity and that I was best positioned to provide it. The ugly answer is I wanted the title. I wanted one thing Dad couldn't look at and tell me I hadn't earned. Your father has been dead 2 years. That hasn't stopped him yet. The sentence was cruel, and true in the way cruelty sometimes is. Daniel opened the message thread and forwarded it to Halcyon's general counsel, copying Samuel and the audit committee chair. Then he forwarded it to Pamela. I will withdraw the petition, he said. Not in exchange for silence, I replied. His face hardened. I didn't ask for that. Good. Do you want me fired? I could have said no. A loving mother should say no. A controlling shareholder had no right to answer. I want the independent directors to decide after a fair investigation. He looked as if I had struck him. There it is, he said. The board before your son. No. The boundary between my son and the board. He stood. You hid behind that boundary for 11 years. Yes, I said. And you crossed every boundary you could find because you were afraid. He left without saying goodbye. By Sunday evening, forensic review showed the petition had been emailed to the Tennessee lessor from an encrypted address, but the attached PDF contained metadata. It had been created on a computer registered to Mercervale Advisory. The consultant connected to Russell Dane. The evidence did not show who pressed send. It showed the leak came from Broadgate's orbit. The open question was how they obtained the filed copy. Pamela found the answer Monday morning. Her junior associate had sent Russell's counsel a copy while discussing whether Broadgate might testify about my financial behavior. She had not authorized it. The associate believed Daniel had consented. Daniel said he had not. There would be bar complaints, insurance notices, and a separate fight over privilege. No single lawyer had walked in and solved anything. Several had, through haste and assumption, made it worse. Halcyon's audit committee placed Daniel on paid leave before noon on Monday. Martin stepped away from the financing committee but refused to resign. Broadgate withdrew its offer and issued a 2-sentence denial that mentioned neither the petition nor the Tennessee lessor. At 9 Tuesday morning, 2 investigators hired by the independent directors sat across from me in a windowless conference room. A small red light glowed on their recorder. "Did you tell Samuel Ortiz how to vote on the Broadgate offer?" the lead investigator asked. "No, did you imply that directors who approved it could be removed?" "No." He slid a copy of my email across the table. I had written that Northstar would hold every fiduciary accountable for the value destroyed by an inadequately reviewed transaction. Reading it in that room, I heard the threat I had told myself was merely precision. "I wrote that," I said. "What did you intend?" "To make them slow down." "Did your ownership make it difficult for them to hear it as anything but an instruction?" I looked at Naomi. "She did not rescue me." "Probably," I said. The investigator made a note. "You have criticized your son's judgment. Why should the committee believe yours was independent of the guardianship case?" I wanted to tell him that Daniel had tried to take away my rights. I wanted the fact to answer every question that followed. It did not. "You should not believe it because I say so," I replied. "Review the calls, the board materials, and the alternatives. If I crossed the line, put it in your report." That afternoon, Heartland found a different line crossed in Halcyon's cash forecast. A disputed $1.8 million receivable had been classified as delayed rather than doubtful. The CFO called it a coding error. Evelyn Brooks called me herself. "My credit committee thinks somebody is still shaping the numbers," she said. "Are you walking away?" "I will decide after I ask Daniel Bennett who changed the classification." Daniel was interviewed the next morning. I was not in the room, but the recording was later summarized for the audit committee. The CFO had approved the classification. Daniel had challenged it in an email, then used the inflated forecast in his Broadgate presentation without disclosing his objection. "Why?" the investigator asked him. "Because the corrected forecast made the company look as if it could fail before the deal closed." "Could it?" "Yes." Then the corrected forecast was the one the board needed. There was a long silence on the recording. "Yes," Daniel said. Then they placed Russell's draft employment agreement in front of him. Daniel admitted he wanted the presidency. He denied trading the guardianship petition for it. Phone records supported part of his account. His concern about my memory began months before he knew Northstar's identity. But once he suspected the connection, he had allowed Russell to turn fear into leverage. The investigators asked whether he understood the conflict. "I understand it now," he said. That was not the question. He looked down at his hands. "No. I understood it then. I believed the emergency made me the exception." That answer would follow him longer than any excuse. For one long Tuesday, Heartland's facility appeared dead. Then 3 things happened, not miracles, just enough movement to keep the door open. Veterans Transit signed a non-binding letter of intent for a pilot program. 2 existing customers agreed to pay early in exchange for small discounts. Northstar's independent committee approved a $2 million interim note at a market rate, limited to 60 days and subordinate to Heartland. On Thursday, Heartland issued a conditional commitment. Halcyon had not been saved. It had bought time, and time came with interest. The investigation continued. Portal records proved Lucas had uploaded the Veterans Transit lead 12 days before the vote. Martin had opened it. His phone showed repeated private calls with Russell, although investigators found no payment or secret contract. A forensic analyst traced the copy of the petition sent to the lessor to the consulting firm Broadgate had recommended. Broadgate said the leak was unauthorized. The evidence showed a chain of access and self-interest, not a single message ordering a crime. Martin resigned before the board could vote on removing him. Then the independent directors met about Daniel. I stayed home. I recused myself in writing, made no calls, and asked Naomi to preserve the record of my silence. At 10:14 that night, my phone rang. Samuel sounded 20 years older. The vote was 5-1, he said. I gripped the edge of the kitchen counter. For what? Termination. Not for Tennessee, the board approved that expansion. For the photograph, the undisclosed employment proposal, and the forecast he knew was misleading. Daniel would lose his title and unvested equity. To avoid months of litigation over whether the policy required termination for cause, the company offered a negotiated separation worth 6 months of salary. It did not buy his silence or erase the findings. Did he say anything? I asked. Only that he understood. I thanked Samuel, ended the call, and stood perfectly still until the refrigerator motor clicked off. Then I went to the bathroom and was sick. I had stopped Daniel from using concern as control. I had not saved him from the consequences of what he had done. Those were not the same thing, though my body seemed unable to tell the difference. That evening, Daniel came to collect boxes from my garage. Years earlier, he had stored college books, fishing gear, and a wooden crib Frank built for our granddaughter. Claire remained in the car. I watched him lift a box labeled Dad, Shop. That belongs to you, I said. Apparently nothing does until the paperwork says so. I let the remark pass. He found Frank's old machinist's level wrapped in a towel. The brass was worn smooth where his thumb had rested. He wanted you to have that, I said. Did he tell you, or is that another thing I'm supposed to trust? I went into the house and returned with a sealed envelope. Frank had written it during hospice. I had found it in the Northstar binder after his death and never delivered it. That was my worst mistake. On the front, in Frank's square handwriting, were the words for Daniel, when he's ready to stop arguing with me. Daniel looked at the envelope but did not take it. Why do you have that? Because I thought you were too raw after the funeral. Then we argued about the estate. Then too much time passed, and giving it to you meant admitting I had kept it. 2 years. Yes. What's in it? I don't know. It is sealed. He examined the flap. You expect me to believe you never opened it? No, I said. I hope someday you will. He took the letter. At the car, he paused but did not turn around. The petition wasn't only about the company, he said. You know that, right? I do now. After Dad died, you disappeared while standing right in front of us. You stopped coming over. You forgot things because you weren't listening. You gave money to Marisol because saving her shop made you feel like you could still save part of him. Every time I asked if you were all right, you gave me a banker's answer. I gripped the porch rail. You could have asked for an evaluation without asking for control of my estate. I did ask. I remembered changing the subject. More than once. Then you should have kept asking, I said. And I should have answered. He nodded once. It was not forgiveness. It was the first accurate thing we had agreed on in months. The final guardianship hearing took place 5 weeks after the first. Dr. Shaw's report found me capable of managing my person and estate. She recommended grief counseling, better medication tracking, and a voluntary system for emergency contacts. She also wrote that interpersonal conflict had magnified ordinary lapses into perceived pathology. Daniel withdrew his allegations of incapacity. He testified that he no longer believed a guardianship was necessary. Judge Holt dismissed the petition. Before doing so, she addressed both of us. Autonomy includes the right to make choices one's family considers unwise, she said. It does not require perfection. At the same time, secrecy can create legitimate concern, particularly after bereavement. Protective proceedings are not tools for resolving mistrust, business disputes, or unfinished family conversations. She did not scold Daniel as a villain or praise me as a heroine. She returned my legal freedom because the evidence required it. Outside the courtroom, reporters waited because the Broadgate dispute had become business news. Naomi advised me to make no statement beyond confirming dismissal. Daniel left through another exit. The court record was partly sealed, not erased. Broadgate and Mercer Vale faced civil claims from Halcyon and the lessor dispute went to mediation. Pamela's firm reported the disclosure and reached an agreement over fees. None of it ended with handcuffs or a dramatic confession. Most harm is distributed among people who each tell themselves their part was small. Halcyon survived the winter. Heartland closed the credit facility after difficult negotiations. The company froze executive bonuses, sold unused land beside the Tennessee plant, and reduced its workforce through attrition and 41 layoffs. 41 families still paid for decisions made in rooms they never entered. Veterans Transit eventually signed a pilot contract, not the enormous deal everyone wanted, but enough to keep the adaptive seating division busy. The Tennessee line was scaled down and repurposed. Halcyon posted a loss that year and a modest profit the next. I changed the governance structure of Northstar, not in a burst of anger, but over months. Helen remained co-trustee. We added clearer succession provisions and created a family information policy. My granddaughter would not someday learn from a court filing that her family owned something important. I also joined the Halcyon board for 1 year, then stepped down after recruiting an independent director with manufacturing and restructuring experience. I had no desire to become an elderly queen at the end of a conference table. Control should have an exit plan. Daniel was unemployed for 4 months. The investigation followed him. 2 companies withdrew interest after background checks. He blamed me at first. Perhaps part of him still does. Eventually, a mid-sized medical device manufacturer hired him to lead operations at a plant in Indiana. It was a smaller title and less money. During his interview, he disclosed the Halcyon termination before they discovered it. He told them he had failed to recognize a conflict, had allowed a financing source to influence his judgment, and had learned that urgency did not suspend governance. The hiring manager later told Claire that answer got him the job. He and I did not speak for nearly 3 months. Then, on a Sunday in March, he called. I opened Dad's letter, he said. I sat down at the kitchen table. What did it say? Some of it was about the company. I waited. He said I saw opportunities faster than he did, but I mistook speed for courage. He said he mistook caution for wisdom. That sounded like Frank, the rare compliment protected on both sides by criticism. Daniel continued. He said the Tennessee market was real. He thought my scale was wrong, not the idea. I closed my eyes. He told me that, I said. I figured. I should have told you. Yes. There was no gentle rescue from the word. The letter also says you control North Star, Daniel said. I opened my eyes. Frank had intended to tell him. All my explanations about protecting Daniel's independence collapsed at once. I had not preserved Frank's plan. I had delayed it until the secret became mine. He wrote that you would explain when the timing was right, Daniel said. I kept deciding it wasn't. Why? The easy answer was grief. The truer one was control. Because when your father died, everyone needed something from me. Banks needed signatures. The hospice needed equipment returned. You needed decisions. The board needed continuity. Knowing the whole picture made me feel less helpless. If I told you, it would become a conversation I couldn't control. Daniel was quiet. So you kept the company, he said. And the conversation. I tried to take both. Yes. Neither of us said we were even. Love is not bookkeeping. He asked if he could come by the following weekend. He brought Claire and our granddaughter, Sophie. We ate roast chicken at the kitchen table. I lost my reading glasses and found them on top of my head. Nobody wrote it down. After dinner, Daniel asked to see the North Star binder. My body tightened before my mind could answer. He noticed. Not to manage it, he said. Just to understand what Dad meant. I brought it from the basement. We spent 2 hours going through the history, early certificates, recapitalization notices, trust amendments, board correspondence. Daniel found places where Frank's notes disagreed with company strategy. He found others where Frank had supported decisions Daniel assumed he opposed. At one point, Sophie wandered in and asked why we had so much old paper. Because your grandfather did not trust computers, Daniel said. Your grandfather did not trust people who trusted computers, I corrected. Daniel laughed. It was a small sound, but the house had been waiting for it. 1 year after the petition, I stood outside Marisol's machine shop while 9 employees rolled a new piece of equipment through the loading bay. She had repaid the loan 3 months early. Your son coming to the dinner? She asked. He says he is. That means no? With Daniel, it means he has checked traffic twice and will arrive 7 minutes early. He arrived 9 minutes early. He had changed in ways visible only if you knew where to look. He asked more questions before offering answers. He still moved quickly, still disliked ambiguity, still straightened crooked objects when anxious. I still withheld things when afraid of conflict. Character does not vanish because consequences arrive. It becomes harder to pretend you do not see it. Daniel never returned to Halcyon. That was probably best. He did, however, serve for 6 months on an unpaid advisory group reviewing the Veterans Transit rollout after the company invited technical input from former executives. The board set boundaries. He respected them. We did not rewrite what happened. He had taken real concern about my grief and memory, mixed it with professional panic and old hunger for his father's approval, and used a legal instrument too large for the problem he understood. I had taken legitimate privacy, mixed it with pride and fear, and kept a secret large enough to distort his career and our relationship. His mistake threatened my autonomy. Mine did not justify his. Both facts could stand without canceling each other. On the anniversary of Frank's death, Daniel and I drove to the cemetery together. Claire and Sophie stayed home. The maples had turned red along the road. Daniel placed the machinist's level beside the headstone for a moment. I hated him, he said. Sometimes. I wanted to beat him at something. Most sons do. Did he know? He was a son too. We stood in silence. Then Daniel asked, "Are you going to leave me the Halcyon shares?" The old version of our relationship would have turned that question into an accusation. I would have heard greed. He would have heard judgment in my pause. No, I said. He looked at me. Not directly. North Star's voting control will convert under the succession plan. Some economic interests will go to you and Sophie. A foundation will receive others. Independent trustees will oversee the transition. You will receive the documents while I am alive, and we will review them together. He nodded slowly. That sounds sensible. It is also revocable, so behave yourself. He smiled. There she is. Before we left, I touched Frank's name carved into the stone. A judge had returned my legal freedom in a single morning. Rebuilding trust had taken a year, and neither Daniel nor I could order the other to do it. As we walked back to the car, Daniel offered me his arm where the ground sloped. My first instinct was to refuse. My balance was fine, and for months every offer of help had sounded like a question about my competence. Daniel did not reach for me. He simply left his arm there and let me decide. I took it. We crossed the uneven ground together, neither of us leading for long.